Brazil is a developing country, and as a developing country we have many, many challenges, different sorts of challenges. Infrastructural challenges, social challenges, economic growth challenges, competitive challenges, environmental challenges, challenges of security. We have to face all of them. And we have chosen a very clear democratic path to deal with this issue. And we have to organize our actions in accordance to what the democratic path dictates.
And you said you have a number of challenges, and one of those challenges is that the people seem unhappy.
Well, this is a very diffuse feeling, because if you look at very recent statistics about happiness, future outcome, Brazil is among the top countries in the world. The fact is that we have done a lot of things.
There are always statistics, and then you see the reality of the pictures of people on the streets. That speaks far louder than a survey of, a few hundred people.
Well, Brazil is a very big country, 200 million people, and this is a very loud demonstration, and I believe that we must listen to what they're saying. Of course, this is a novel thing. It's a different way of expression. They do not have an active political participation. There are channels for that type of political participation. They are choosing novel forms of participation. The social media is being very instrumental in this respect. And we have to try to understand. It's very diffuse, so we don't really know. But the fact is that Brazil has achieved formidable things over the past 15, 20 years.
And no one would doubt that. And everyone's looked at the extraordinary achievement that's taken place in the BRIC countries and elsewhere. But when you have people like that saying corruption every day, you have all sorts of demonstrators complaining about the corruption from on high to low down that they think is a disease in your country.
Well, I'm sure that this is an issue. Our president has tackled this very strongly since she took office more than 2 years ago. It's going to continue to be an issue. Everything is a process. We have to undertake what is possible to undertake. And of course, some things you do well, some things you don't do so well. But it's a process that is converging. In Brazil, what is more important than anything are two really important things. First of all, social inclusion, which is the fundamental element of any successful country, to create true citizens. For that, you cannot have marginalized citizens. And we are doing this process in Brazil. Consolidation of democracy, another process. But a very important issue is a compilation of good practices. And I think we have been doing that for the past many years, but we still have a long way to go. And many things have to be achieved. And of course there's corruption, and we have to face that. But we have been facing that. There's still a long road ahead, though.
Let's talk about the World Cup next year. Some would say, and the protesters have been saying it, why are we spending all this money on hosting the World Cup, which is a vanity project? It's a statement of saying, look, we've arrived as a nation, we can afford to build these stadiums. When you can't afford basic health care, when some people have not got proper education, when there's poor sanitation in the favelas and all the rest of it.
This is a substantive issue which has to be adequately squared. I think the whole of Brazil was very eager to do that. When the announcement was made that Brazil would host not just the World Cup, but the Olympic Games, it was a national jubilation. You cannot hide that. It was a true fact. It was in all pages of the main newspapers in the world. So it's a very fluctuating sentiment that will be channelized according to circumstances. I think that hosting the World Cup has an enormous benefit for Brazil. An enormous benefit that is almost palpable in financial terms as well.
Why? How?
Because the repercussion that it generates, the image that it projects, and the fact that this can bring additional inputs into Brazil. And the same happens with the World Cup, with the Olympic Games. This has happened in many countries. This is a game changer for cities sometimes, for countries in other instances. It can be extremely, extremely helpful.
It can also be a very, very costly thing to host, where you end up with a pile of stadiums that no one wants to use anymore, and you see the grass growing up between the concrete.
Well, that has happened before as well, so you're quite right in that. I think that this is something we have to be very much aware of. We have to think of the legacy issue, we have to think of the sustainability issue, and all of those are being tackled as well.
Ambassador, let me just ask you this finally. Do you worry that, the argument is being made that we can't afford to host the World Cup, that actually this does you economic damage because people see these protests, it affects your productivity, it affects willingness to invest in Brazil, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy that it actually does damage your economy to the point where you can't afford to host the World Cup.
Well, I really don't think that at all. In fact, we're witnessing now that we're having all of this very exciting, to a certain extent, popular manifestations, and still are hosting a global event, which is the Confederations Cup, without any major hiccups. In fact, I think it really shows that we're very capable of hosting the World Cup.